On May 3, 2026, in the critical shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy issued a stark declaration on open frequencies to all global vessels. This unprecedented move aimed to assert control over one of the world's most vital maritime choke points. This was the prelude to a massive United States operation designed to counter Iranian aggression in the Strait. For the first time in months, U.S. warships transited through Hormuz, directly challenging Iran. This initial maneuver, however, was merely the precursor to a far larger, multi-layered military deployment now flowing into the region. The broadcast message was chilling. Attention all vessels, this is Iranian Sepah Navy. If you see any warship in your vicinity, keep a distance more than 10 miles from them, because I'm ready to open fire on them without any warning. The IRGC had further declared that ships wishing to transit the strait could only utilize a corridor designated by Iran. Any vessel deviating from this route would be deemed a threat, subject to a firm response from the Revolutionary Guards. This threat had proven effective. For over 2 months, approximately 23,000 civilian sailors from 87 nations had been held hostage in the Gulf due to these restrictions. The IRGC leveraged these individuals as a bargaining chip, trapping mariners from countries with no direct connection to the conflict simply by exercising its perceived authority. At least 10 civilian sailors had tragically lost their lives during this period. This declaration constituted an official ultimatum, asserting that any contrary action would be interpreted as a direct threat, warranting a decisive military response. This tactic of holding civilian sailors hostage represents a significant departure from established international maritime conventions, elevating a geopolitical standoff to a humanitarian crisis. Such a broad and indiscriminate targeting of non-combatants is an unusual escalation designed to exert pressure on a global scale rather than purely military objectives. On May 4, 2026, the United States moved to dismantle this precarious situation. Iran had previously violated a ceasefire, launching attacks on vessels in the Gulf and targeting the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. response was a measured and professional countermove. Project Freedom had commenced. 3 destroyers advanced directly towards Hormuz. Above them, an air protection umbrella was established, comprising F-35B stealth fighters and AH-64 Apache attack helicopters. The corridor, unilaterally declared by the IRGC, was completely disregarded. The IRGC reacted instantly, activating its naval radars, issuing warnings to the American destroyers, and deploying its speedboats into the sea. However, these boats did not directly engage the U.S. warships. Instead, they fanned out towards commercial cargo ships attempting to transit the strait. The probable aim was to induce panic by paralyzing civilian traffic. This calculation backfired completely. Apache and Seahawk helicopters, launched from the destroyers, acquired locks on the Iranian boats. Against advanced thermal optics and smart munitions, the small vessels were sunk within seconds. A total of 7 IRGC fast attack boats were destroyed, with not a single scratch reported on the U.S. side. What unfolded next was the IRGC's worst nightmare. 2 U.S.-flagged commercial ships successfully passed through Hormuz under escort. With 3 destroyers now positioned in the Persian Gulf, the United States is actively patrolling the very strait where the IRGC had once declared, "Whoever enters cannot leave." Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated clearly at a press conference that the operation was defensive in nature, but warned that retaliation would follow any attack. He further announced that the 7 Iranian boats that ignored warnings were now lying on the seabed, alongside the remnants of Iran's navy. The declaration the IRGC had issued just 3 days prior had effectively been rendered null and void. So, did the IRGC actually possess the power to halt this passage? The answer to that question lies in an objective examination of Iran's remaining coastal capabilities in Hormuz. According to AOL's Keshem Island analysis, the underground missile complexes and shelters on Iran's strategic island remain intact. An Iran press report from February 16, 2026, indicated that the coastal anti-ship missiles and kamikaze drones showcased in the IRGC's Smart Hormuz control drills are designed for short-range operations within narrow waters. Mine-laying capacity is also technically available, but a significant disparity appears to exist between this theoretical capability and its practical application on the ground. The IRGC's much-touted swarm tactic proved ineffective against Apache helicopters. Iran's conventional navy had been largely destroyed in earlier phases of the conflict. A May 4th report from the Times of Israel confirms that the IRGC attempted a limited intervention but deliberately avoided a full-scale attack. The layered air shield established by the U.S. may now present an insurmountable barrier for Iran. F-35B stealth fighters are invisible to Iranian radars and possess precision strike capability in daylight. Apache helicopters provide round-the-clock thermal surveillance. Under this overwhelming superiority, every missile or drone launched from shore can be detected and intercepted in advance. Furthermore, initiating a full-scale naval battle would jeopardize Iran's own economy, which is already hemorrhaging $500 million a day under the existing blockade. Such a move would amount to strategic suicide. The Hormuz card, which the IRGC had leveraged for years to hold the world hostage, has practically lost its effectiveness. The United States has not merely neutralized this card, it is now deploying an even larger force into the region. The 3 destroyers that breached Hormuz were merely the vanguard. The military force now flowing into the region under Project Freedom is far more extensive and multi-layered. The amphibious assault ship USS Boxer, leading the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, or MEU, departed from San Diego with 2,500 Marines and full combat equipment on board. It is expected to reach the Sea of Oman shortly. The Boxer is not operating in isolation. According to Army recognition, the 31st MEU, led by the USS Tripoli, is already deployed in the region and actively participating in the blockade. Photos in circulation confirm that both ships are in full combat formation, with F-35B stealth fighters visible on their decks. With these 2 groups merging, more than 4,000 Marines are now standing by on amphibious ships. This directly completes the logistical infrastructure for a potential coastal operation or landing scenario. However, these amphibious groups represent only one facet of this comprehensive deployment. According to the War Zone, the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS George H.W. Bush carrier strike groups are already positioned in the Arabian Sea. Combined with the 3 destroyers that transited Hormuz, the total U.S. warship presence in the region now encompasses 3 carrier groups and numerous destroyers and frigates. These vessels are equipped with Aegis combat systems, providing both advanced air defense and cruise missile capabilities. AWB report indicates that 2,200 additional Marines and 3 more Navy ships are slated for deployment to the Middle East. Images shared by U.S. Marine Corps Command confirm that these units are in preparation. Beneath the surface, a silent deterrent is also in play. While the U.S. nuclear submarine fleet never officially discloses its movements in the region, analysts assess that at least 1 Ohio-class guided missile submarine is positioned near the Persian Gulf. Each of these submarines is capable of carrying 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, posing a threat that no Iranian radar can detect. The U.S. has also initiated mine-clearing operations to secure the Strait passage. CBS News reports that mines the IRGC may have laid in Hormuz are being swept with specially equipped vessels, a critical precondition for the normalization of commercial traffic. In the air, the flow of power continues unabated. C-17 Globemaster strategic transport aircraft are continuously ferrying munitions and equipment. The extensive U.S. tanker fleet is refueling fighter jets mid-air, while F-15, F-16, and FA-18 fighter jets, launching from Gulf bases, monitor the region 24 hours a day. This is where the F-35B factor fundamentally alters the equation. These aircraft are invisible to Iranian radars and possess daylight precision strike capability. They are an ideal tool for hardened targets such as the underground bases on Qeshm Island, the port facilities at Bandar Abbas, and the IRGC's coastal missile ramps. Their ability to operate simultaneously from 2 separate amphibious platforms may effectively blind Iran's entire air defense and surveillance systems. The entire logistics chain, stretching from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean and from there to the Sea of Oman, once again demonstrates the U.S. Capability for rapid global power projection. A sustainable supply line has been established through Guam and Hawaii. This massive force is approaching Iran's shores minute by minute. And within this looming colossal force lies yet another brand new and massive element that will completely rewrite the rules of the game. But the United States is not content with merely its existing forces. It is also preparing to deploy a massive new element that will fundamentally shake all geopolitical balances in the field. CENTCOM is planning to deploy Dark Eagle hypersonic missiles to the Middle East for a possible deep strike against Iran. This development fundamentally alters the military chessboard. Until now, Iran had pursued a strategy of utilizing its own geographic expanse as a shield. Beyond relying on its fast boats and drones, its true guarantee lay in relocating its long-range ballistic missile launchers away from Gulf shores, concealing them deep within the country and in mountainous regions. The Tehran administration believed that by positioning these launchers beyond the range of the American military's conventional Tomahawk cruise missiles, it could comfortably target U.S. bases in the Gulf, Arab countries, and Israel from what it considered safe zones. However, the limitations of this strategy are now evident. The deployment of the Dark Eagle system can resolve Iran's threat equation in an instant. Traveling at over 5 times the speed of sound, Mach 5+, and capable of executing complex maneuvers to evade air defense systems as it approaches its target. This technology demolishes the depth defense doctrine. This is precisely why Dark Eagle can emerge as a game-changer for the region. Iran's bunkers carved into mountains, or its mobile launchers, will not escape targeting against this enormous kinetic energy and speed. The regime can neither hide from these weapons nor stop them with its outdated air defense systems. The logistical infrastructure for this massive military preparation is also being meticulously constructed. In the air corridor between Europe and the Middle East, C-17A heavy transport aircraft are in constant flight. On a single day alone, 11 C-17 aircraft were observed departing from Ramstein and Lakenheath, carrying cargo on routes to the eastern Mediterranean, Jordan, and Qatar. Turkey's Incirlik Air Base has become one of the most critical springboards of this massive air bridge. C-17s, C-130s, and refueling aircraft complete their logistical preparations here before transitioning to strategic points like Djibouti and Diego Garcia. It appears Washington is not merely conducting a short-term show of force in the region. Rather, it is building the supply chain for a possible operation that could endure for months, on solid foundations. The introduction of hypersonic missiles like Dark Eagle fundamentally redefines strategic deterrence, rendering traditional deep strike doctrines obsolete. This capability bypasses the historical reliance on geographic depth for protection, forcing adversaries to reconsider the viability of hidden assets and potentially accelerating the timeline for any conflict resolution. The reality that Tehran must now contend not just with regional allies, but with a global logistics highway is deepening the panic within the administration even further. The U.S. Gulf strategy is not confined to its own navy. It is equipping its allies with a massive military shield. According to an Al Jazeera report from March 19, 2026, a $16.5 billion arms sale to Gulf states was approved. This includes THAAD missile defense reinforcement and F-16 munitions for the United Arab Emirates, along with Patriot system renewals and tank supplies for Saudi Arabia. The Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE serves as the main logistics hub for U.S. forces in the region. The UAE's own F-16 Block 60 fighter jets, versions equipped with more advanced intelligence capabilities than America's own F-16, are a critical component of this defense shield. The layered defense system operates on 3 separate tiers. THAAD intercepts ballistic threats at the upper layer, Patriot covers mid-altitude, and counter-drone systems shoot down even Iran's cheapest weapons. The tangible impact of this technology transfer is evident as every wave Iran launches at the UAE is intercepted mid-air. While the U.S. equips its allies to this depth, every Iranian attack attempt depletes its own resources, while the other side's defense only grows stronger. The rationale behind Iran directing these attacks at the UAE warrants separate examination. The IRGC, seemingly unable to muster the courage to directly attack U.S. destroyers, redirected its aggression towards the UAE on May 4, 2026, launching 5 waves of missile and drone attacks. On May 5th, these attacks continued for a second day. In the final wave of attacks alone, 8 ballistic missiles and 20 drones were launched, all intercepted mid-air. These attacks likely had 2 primary aims. First, to divert U.S. attention from the Strait to the UAE, thereby easing pressure on Hormuz. However, the U.S. did not fall for this trap. Second, to strike the UAE's ADCOP bypass terminal in Fujairah, the only major infrastructure enabling the UAE to export oil directly without transiting Hormuz. Saudi Arabia's Yanbu pipeline had also been hit previously. The implicit message was likely, if we can't export, your billion-dollar bypass routes aren't safe either. But this strategy also appears to be collapsing. Every failed wave erodes Iran's missile stockpiles, and resupply under sanctions is becoming increasingly difficult. The U.S. may have completely sabotaged the hostage-taking strategy that the IRGC imposed with its May 3rd declaration through this operation. The regime's perception of "we speak, the world listens" was shattered overnight. And the economic front, running parallel to the military operations, may be hurting Iran even more than the missiles. The Operation Epic Fury, Economic Fury operation, announced by Secretary Rubio as part of a Pentagon briefing reported by Mario Norful, has effectively paralyzed Iran's trade capacity. 90% of Iran's trade has been halted, costing the regime $500 million a day. Inflation has soared into the 70% band. The rial is in free fall, and the scope of sanctions is expanding, with any foreign financial institution assisting Iran facing a loss of access to the U.S. financial system. Secretary Rubio also spoke clearly about Iran's nuclear program, emphasizing that despite claims of not seeking nuclear weapons, Tehran is constructing secret enrichment facilities in mountains, holding 60% enriched uranium, and developing long-range missiles. Former President Trump stated that the solution is simple: the regime needs to surrender, and that if this were a fight, it should have been stopped by now. IDF Chief of Staff Major General Zamir also announced on the same day that their forces are deployed across all sectors and in immediate readiness for any scenario, near or far. When assessing this entire picture from a geostrategic perspective, the domino effects of the U.S. breaking through Hormuz run much deeper. The IRGC's biggest strategic card has been practically neutralized. For years, the regime had held the region hostage by threatening to close the Strait. Now, the U.S. is freely transiting its destroyers, while the IRGC is unable to mount any concrete response. This situation is also impacting global energy markets. The partial opening of Hormuz has paved the way for tanker traffic to resume, carrying the potential to stabilize oil prices that had been escalating during the blockade period. And perhaps the most critical domino effect, the Gulf states uniting against Iran. This U.S. move sent a powerful message to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states. We are by your side, and the IRGC's threats are not enough to stop you. This injection of confidence may have significantly strengthened the Gulf's resolve to act as a unified body against Iran. The U.S. has combined military power and economic blockade into a single, cohesive strategy. Project Freedom opened Hormuz. Operation Epic Fury has crippled the Iranian economy. Allies were equipped with $16.5 billion in weapons, and the IRGC's regional terror strategy, its naval blockade, missile attacks, holding commercial ships hostage, and targeting bypass infrastructure, was neutralized one by one. Iran now faces 3 paths, and all 3 appear to be dead ends. Surrendering would collapse the regime's internal structure. Maintaining the status quo means a slow death under the blockade. Escalating the war would be strategic suicide for a regime with no effective navy, no air power, and no air defense left. The United States has indeed executed something massive. It neutralized the Hormuz threat that the IRGC had used for years to hold the world hostage with a single, decisive operation. It broke through the Strait, sank the boats, equipped its allies, and shattered the Iranian economy. And then it poured 3 carrier groups, more than 4,000 Marines, F-35B stealth aircraft, a submarine fleet, and continuous air resupply into the region. The IRGC's Hormuz card is no longer valid. Its navy is at the bottom of the sea. Its economy is shattered. Gulf states have united against Iran. The direction of the war appears clear. The rapid and comprehensive collapse of Iran's Hormuz card strategy marks a significant shift in regional power dynamics, demonstrating that economic leverage combined with overwhelming military projection can dismantle long-held geopolitical threats far more swiftly than conventional deterrence alone. This integrated approach sets a new precedent for managing strategic choke points, and the end of the IRGC's terror strategy may be approaching. The one variable that will determine the final outcome now rests squarely on the choices made by the Iranian regime itself.